What's up, folks? I'm on, by the way. It's been a minute since I've done a little Speedpaint Storytime. I always think I won't have more stories for these, but somehow I am able to pull more out of my brain. Maybe it's trauma. Probably trauma. I'm kind of working on a slightly bigger project for a video too, but I realized that I needed more time for it, so I figured I'd do some kind of personal art. I guess most of my art is basically personal art, but this one is specifically of my own characters, my OCs that I've created before. I decided to draw my girls Phoenix and Aramis again, and because I've been feeling like my human style is all over the place, I decided to also make them FURSONAs just for the heck of it. It seemed like fun. It was kind of a great way to play around with style, and funnily enough, the human version became one of my favorite drawings of them. I think I just let myself, play with shapes a little bit more. I sort of just drew them sitting and floating a bit, and I wound up having to redraw the sketch like 3 times, and even decided to draw little shaped language shorthand sketches of their bodies before this. I don't think that I've ever really done that before, and it definitely helped a lot. Phoenix and Aramis are main characters from my existing and long-running brainchild called Thrakos, which is kind of a Wild West-themed high fantasy. It basically starts out as a sort of screwball road trip because Aramis is kind of a city girl who has found her way into the situation with Phoenix, who is from this kind of wild, lawless territory. It kind of turns into a whole item hunt to save the known universe, normal stuff. I like to make it a comic one day, but it would be like a huge undertaking, so I'd like to get more under my belt before then, and also it's just been in production for forever, so sharing it is a little scary. Aramis has this regular association with dogs for me, mostly because she has them and likes them, but also because she's a little domesticated and sheltered, but she's still quite large and strong, so I thought I'd make her an Akita mix. Phoenix, meanwhile, is obviously a little wild, but is still kind of lithe and small. My first option was an Arctic fox, which is actually a big native species in Dairyguild where they live, but I figured a kind of lightly colored coyote actually made more sense for her. But let's actually get into those gruesome injury stories. Hooray! So these are obviously going to have some pretty direct descriptions of injury, but no pictures. The only picture that I would have is the most recent one, and that's probably not very chill to show on YouTube, I guess beside the resulting scar from it, but even then, it's not really worth it. You're welcome to, mute this and play music on another tab if you get a little squeamish. I don't think they're too bad, but I know everyone has their limits. I'm a pretty clumsy person. Thankfully, I haven't actually broken a bone in my entire life, weirdly enough. But I have had a few big injuries in my life. The first big one I remember involved a trampoline, because of course it did. I was learning how to flip on our backyard trampoline, and I did eventually get the guts and the momentum to turn over in the air at least once. I decided to try and show my brother, who had been trying to teach me, but when I went to do it again, I must have hit the jump wrong or just not turned enough or something. I landed right on my head. I have never been a light person, okay? Even when I wasn't necessarily overweight, I was a very dense child, in fact, so landing right on top of my neck resulted in an injury that left me incapacitated for what felt like weeks. I don't really know if I pulled a muscle or what, some form of whiplash. I think it passed before there was enough concern to actually take me to the hospital. Yay for the American healthcare system. I did fully recover eventually, but I never tried to flip on a trampoline again. Next one is quite down the line. So I took some art classes over at our local community college. This had to be somewhere around 2019 to 2020. And though I was also taking a sculpture class at that time that had me working in this wood shop, this assignment was actually during a painting class. So we had this assignment where we were going to make a shaped canvas by stretching it over a unique shape we made in the wood shop. I think I was a little tired and distracted that day, which is the first big no-no of shop safety, by the way, but I was in college. It's not like I'm going to skip out on a project day because I was a little sleepy. I wanted to get this done. Anyway, everything went pretty smoothly, although I did accidentally break a piece of wood at one point, but I'd gotten my sides relatively assembled and went to the belt sander to clean up some edges that didn't fully match up. When I'm almost done, I lose concentration for a split second and suddenly realize I feel like I had burned my finger. I looked down and saw that my nail had scraped up against the belt sander. I have a weirdly calm shock response. I just immediately jumped back and said I hurt myself in like the most placid tone you'd ever hear. I even had to raise my voice so that the instructor knew. Wound up having to go get a bandage, fill out an injury form, and all that stuff. The sander had gotten down to the nail bed in that amount of time, like instantly. And trust me, I know that sounds horrible and cringeworthy. I cannot deal with hand or nail injury. Honestly, it was like, wow, the worst has happened and I didn't die. And honestly, it wasn't the worst. I think the sander might have kind of cauterized the wound a little bit, so it wasn't bleeding or anything. It wound up just throbbing in pain for a little bit once I finally came down from like the endorphins of the shock. I had a hole in my nail for a few weeks, but it's fully grown back now. Little to no evidence it was ever there. Frankly, I'm just grateful it wasn't one of the scarier machines like the Jigsaw or something. Oh. Finally, we have the most recent injury, which happened about 2 years ago now, Jesus. If you've watched a couple of my older videos, you might have heard about my seasonal park maintenance job I had with this one relatively big city park. Well, on the 4th of July, which was not long after I started there, like at all, the park obviously has this big fireworks event for Independence Day, and therefore maintenance is kind of kept over their expected time cleaning up trash. There was a lot of trash, and I guess that's to be expected. I was alone, probably for one of the first times, in my little cart, carrying trash bags and kind of in a hurry to get done because it was getting quite late. So I was throwing these bags into this big old dumpster that we had to go and like putter around to commute to, right? It was tall enough that I had to throw the bags over, like, into it. Well, one of the heavier bags that I did this sort of pendulum swing with turned out to have glass or some kind of sharp material sticking out of the bottom. Not uncommon. Although there is a reason that you keep that stuff relatively far away from your body. I don't even know how it necessarily swung around to catch my right wrist. I think I had it swing around outside and then inside and it just brushed past. But it did, and I watched as this bag goes flying with like a little stream of blood behind it. My right wrist had been slashed pretty cleanly, actually, but it was kind of deep, deeper than a lot of cuts I've gotten before. I immediately rinsed it with my water bottle first because I was cut by trash, and that sounds like an instant recipe for infection. And then, again, weirdly calm, turned on my radio and called for the rest of the team. Yeah, I cut myself. I genuinely didn't know what to do beyond that, and again, probably was in a little shock, and it was still obviously bleeding. One of my coworkers, came instantly, packed me into her car, and took me to the Rangers, who had a relatively large first aid kit. I just remember on the way there trying to keep my arm, above my head because it prevents more blood flow, but still just watching blood drip down to my elbow as we drove to where the Rangers were. They patched me up, had me take a work injury form to fill out, and I went home early-ish. Probably about a half hour early. There was a whole kerfuffle afterward with getting medical care, too. I called a helpline, actually, that night after I went home because my mom was concerned, to figure out if I needed to go to the AR, and they recommended that because it wasn't too deep that I wait and go to urgent care instead. I wound up opting to get a tetanus shot as well because, well, I was cut by trash. But the doctor at the clinic treating me, if he was even a doctor, didn't want to do stitches on my wrist for some reason, so he stapled it. Without any numbing either. That hurt like a bitch. That was very painful. I don't think you're supposed to staple wrists. He said it wouldn't hold with glue, but I just feel like maybe that would constitute stitches, you'd think. Staples feel like they're for large areas that don't have as much minute movement. I wound up getting them removed basically as quickly as I could within a week because the holes from the staples were almost more irritating than the injury itself. Another doctor undid them at that same clinic that time and even said, huh, you know, I've never seen a stapled wrist before in my life, and I get 2 within the same week. Gee, I wonder who did the other one. Maybe this doctor just had a goal to make as many people look like Frankenstein creations as possible. This one's scarred, and the little staple dots around it actually kind of did too. You can only see 1 or 2, and they're not as prominent anymore. But yeah, if you ever see me in real life, that scar isn't anything, like, bad or self-inflicted, okay? I'm just a clumsy oaf who got lacerated by trash. But those are my slightly gruesome injury stories to go with my cute drawings of my characters. You know, totally fits. I hope you liked this video. Be sure to give it a like if you liked it, and subscribe for some more fun art projects and challenges in the future. Like I said, I've maybe got a bigger project in the work for next week. As always though, you can subscribe to see all that in the future and support all these little passion projects of mine, if you could. Thank you very much. At that, I'll leave this here, and I'll see y'all next time.